to the show where you don't know if it's part of the show. Welcome to the show. If you don't know, it's part of the show. Didn't they teach you to reach for the stars while opening up the bars and keeping you chained down with mortgage bills and cars? Vaccines for your arms, kids sounding like supercharged, caffeinated hate-filled scars and rage-quit repertoires. No answers for yards, caught up in emotion that's not even yours. Imposter truths like impeccable retards, lined up for your serving of gish galloping wars. No remedy can save the lost, in love with the yarn. I'm tired of walking into refracted shards, poor science displayed by disgusting bards. Soaked in sin with your dupe is delight in a new hand of cards. Been so long, seems like for love I'm just too hard, I'm just too hard, that's it. Welcome to the show where you don't know if it's part of the show. Welcome to the show. If you don't know, you don't know. Intoxicated 8 makes you believe you're spinning in space while you have no shame or grace. It's a disdainful state I used to contemplate, how to save myself from my own self-hate. Wonder why I was even made with a dreadful fate, forced to try and awake with a full plate. No one to help me stay awake or educate. I've had to liberate and fight through hidden gates, but my brother, heaven could never be late, and rockets don't work in space, it's all fake.
Before we begin, let me say, as one of the contributing hosts of RedHenn Radio, RedHenn Radio is affiliated only with the investigation of the truth, whether that investigation is political, educational, historical, medical, or theoretical. Both the topic and guest are not necessarily endorsed by RedHenn Radio. The hosts of this podcast will present information as evenly as possible, allowing the topic to be understood or the guest to be heard on their own grounds. Thank you for listening, and we ask only that you like, subscribe, comment, and share.
Welcome to the show. If you don't know, you don't know.
Welcome to RedHenn Radio, where the truth is not afraid of investigation, where belief is the enemy of knowing, where everything is up for assessment, and where common sense, logic, and direct empirical realism determine what is true. I'm your host, Travis Finley. An investigator does not investigate nothing. When an investigator asks a question, it's because there is a there, or reasonable doubt is the mother of all conspiracy. Reasonable doubt is the reason to ask a question. Most people don't even know there is a there, and so they are not investigating. Why are you asking that question? Why are you disputing the narrative? Why are you doubting the mainstream story? What makes you ask that question? So, for instance, when I engage Christians who do not ask the questions I do as a Christian, it's more than likely they do not have enough information. That's the way I put it. In order for you to be asking the questions I do, you have to have more information. They don't ask because they don't know. They don't know because they don't see. They don't know there is a there. And when I ask the questions I do, and they do not understand why I'm questioning the authoritative narrative, it makes them nervous. I become a scaramouche to them, or an Espanol travieso, which is fitting since my name is Travis. Soy travieso. I just want to lay a little bit of the groundwork for this podcast, which is going to primarily be driven by interviewing other podcasters that I have learned a great deal from, and my attempts to do research into these arenas. I'm going to have friends on, I'm going to have professionals on, I'm going to have amateurs on, and so my basic hope is that this podcast will ask questions that aren't asked on other podcasts. Not to say I do it better, just to say everybody's different. And so we will venture into those arenas which are rabbit holes, discussions which take us outside of our comfort zone, outside of the box coloring, outside of the lines. RedHenn Radio is a podcast that will encourage you to trust your senses, to question your sources, and to resist consensus. So, welcome to the show, where you don't know if you're part of the show. Sit back, get a cup of joe, get a brew, get a spirit, get a glass of wine, whatever you need to do to relax, bag of popcorn. Welcome to the show. All right, man. You know what they say, imitation is the greatest form of flattery. That's the way Crrow opens all of his shows after his music. All right, man. And every single time, it just brings a smile to my face. I don't know why it makes me so happy. It just does. Well, I wish I could say that incredible opening music was for my own podcast, but alas, I cannot. It belongs to my guest, my first guest, my Maiden Voyage interview with Crrow777. I tell you what, I tune in to his podcast not only for the information that he and his co-host Jason Lindgren put out, but I absolutely love that opening music. I would steal it if I could do it honestly, but anyway, I'm your host, Travis Finley. Welcome to, as I said, my Maiden Voyage. I have an interview with Crrow777, and I want to just give you a little bit of an introduction to him from his webpage. Crrow tells us, this podcast is the result of worldwide reaction to the now famous Lunar Wave footage, first filmed September 26, 2012, as well as the now massive collection of astounding HD clips shot from 2012 to present and uploaded to YouTube on the Crrow777 channel. As Crrow's popularity grew on YouTube, so did censorship and limitations with regard to producing anything resembling free speech and or uncensored video. Everything produced on YouTube by Crrow over the past year and a half has been limited by a line drawn by those in charge, which limits what can be talked about or shown in video. About Crrow, Crrow has spent most of his life challenging the world around us. On the tail of years of telescopic filming which gained worldwide attention, this podcast was launched. Crrow777 Radio Podcast is meant to be a place where everything is challenged and people are free to communicate their ideas. The one rule here is be a higher-minded human being and be polite. The foundational idea that drives this site can be summed up in the following statement: belief is the enemy of knowing. As I said, this is RedHenn Radio. I'm your host, Travis Finley. My first guest is Crrow777. Can we try to go back and let's recreate that as if that conversation was happening for the very first time?
All right, so I was asking you about the red rooster imagery in your RedHenn logo. And I was pointing out that that's probably an alchemical illusion, and people can go to the Hoax Buster YouTube channel and see what I consider one of the best clips I've ever seen in my entire life on YouTube, where he unveils Marie Curie as basically mercury encoded. Within that clip, he begins to show some of the alchemical usages of the idea of the rooster. What people should know is if you've gotten into the natural sciences, the idea of red is masculine, We've shown that in color shows. It's also electric. But the rooster itself is said to be the most electric of animals, and the attribution made there is that's why the rooster crows when the electric sun is rising. So that's just a little bit about what I was mentioning.
Yeah, so my mind is totally blown right now. So I'm like the ignoramus who just goes, I don't know, dude. I just picked the picture, man.
Well,
So,
maybe that may be true, but there may be reasons behind you choosing that picture at the current time.
No, I get it. I get it. The universe was orchestrating everything. So what's funny is what lies behind RedHenn is that's not my construct. That's the construct of Matt Long, who is the co-host on the Flat Earth podcast with David Wise. And so he constructed basically a new follow the white rabbit motif, follow the red hen. And his red hen is a combination of Red Bull and Hennessy. So it's a mixed drink. So red hen is Red Bull mixed with Hennessy, and it just morphed into this image of the red hen, which then I got permission from him to pilfer, and I'm trying to turn that into RedHenn Radio, where we discuss all things regarding the world in which we live, how we observe it, how we understand it, and so that's what we're here doing today, Crow. So first of all, thank you so much for spending time with me and our audience when this is published. I want to start off with a little bit about you. Tell us about your name.
Oh, I get this a lot, so let's just come right out of the gate with saying it has absolutely nothing to do with Aleister Crowley. That's been the accusations made so often, and I'll state for the record, I have no respect for Aleister Crowley. He did nothing of value in our world except rob from traditions that existed and then form it all into a very self-centered idea that didn't really give much of a damn about anyone but his own little self. So just to get that on the record. The reason when I first set up YouTube, I was going to be Crow. There were a lot of crows. My wife and I sat down. The sevens became because my given straw man name is all resolves to sevens, and then the spelling of it is also a poke in the eye at my birth name. So that is the entirety of the idea of Crrow777.
So when you say the spelling of it, you mean the double R?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which I almost wish I hadn't done yet, because it's such a distraction for people who are kind of just starting to wake up, where they latch on to, oh my God, there's 3 sevens. That that means something negative, or this, that, or the other thing. If I had it to do all over again, I think I probably would have just went with Crow. But maybe we're all starting to grow up enough that the content is actually what matters.
Yeah, well, that's kind of like the Foo Fighters.
David Grohl
says that had he known that the Foo Fighters would have been what they are, he would have chosen a different name.
Well, he's got quite a pedigree himself, isn't he? He's like the king of rock and roll right now. Someone should take a look back to, I think it's his father who was writing speeches for presidents. He's another insider, isn't he? He's the king of rock and roll right now. He snaps his fingers, and Zeppelin shows up on his stage, and Zeppelin doesn't show up on anyone's stage for anything. More to that story than most people understand.
One of the things, okay, I wish I could go back existentially to when I first came across your channel, because I had just come into the world of alternate truth, alternate reality, alternate history, and that is Flat Earth. I'm not going to make this discussion about Flat Earth. I'm just giving you some background in terms of where I'm coming from. But once I was awakened to that alternate narrative that I have chosen to follow, that is that the scientific community is not telling us what our world is. They're not being honest with us. The minute I started to look into that, and on my YouTube feed, you came into my world, and so I started listening to you and immediately subscribed because I couldn't not have the second hour. But what you and Jason have done for me is inspirational in terms of creating within me a desire to research and understand the world in which I live. So first of all, again, thank you. I mean, the work that you guys do, I am absolutely amazed and impressed and inspired by it. So thank you so much for all of the research that you guys put into it, and then also the presentation of your material.
Well, maybe I should thank you, because what you just described about yourself is the reason we're doing this.
Right.
If we could get huge numbers of people to do what you're doing, then this begins to matter.
Right, right. And so that's again why I'm doing the radio. It's like someone said, well, why do you need another book on X, Y, and Z? Well, everybody's got their own perspective, and so I'm hoping that the way that I'm going to interview you, the way that I'm going to present the material, is going to be a perspective and a presentation of the information that you don't do, that Sun and Moon doesn't do. Everybody's covering the same information, but I think that hopefully, and there are certain people that I'm sure that are subscribed to me that aren't subscribed to you, and then once they hear this, they're going to subscribe to you, and vice versa. So I think it's all organic and reciprocal.
Well, just getting groups of people to not accept the party line when what's being called alternative thinking right now, in other words, people challenging what they're told, becomes ubiquitous, then we have a different world to live in, probably a better world.
So one of the things that I resonated with you in your show early on is when I started looking into these alternate truths, I had discussions with certain people, and the whole disregard for conspiracy is evident. I'm sure if you've had conversations with people, if you even hint at conspiracy, that immediately puts them in a defensive mode or a dubious position with the discussion that they're having with you. But the way that I phrased it, my understanding was reasonable doubt is the mother of conspiracy.
I guess that's an interesting take, but I would point out that while people will say what Jason and I do is conspiratorial, it's actually researched, all of it. We're not just pulling, thin air out of a hat here. We try to provide our sources, or at least good reason to look into these things. And it's, I guess I would assert we're not offering conspiracy of any kind. It's just that our overarching system of control is so well designed that anything that doesn't fit with the mainstream narrative is automatically conspiracy.
The way that I intended my statement is that if there's a there's a reason to question what you're told. So that was going to be my analogy, was you say to look to see if there is a there, right?
Right.
So what you mean by that, if as far as I understand it, is that you're saying look to see if there's a reason to question what you're being told, or to doubt what you're being told.
Yeah, that's right, and you hit it on the head. Most places in this world would absolutely classify us as conspiratorial. I'm just pointing out that that's not really true when you look at it carefully, and you hit it on the head. I don't expect anyone to accept or believe anything we do, but I do truly hope that they will challenge it, test it, and as you say, see if there's a there.
Everything that we talk about, whether or not it's history, whether or not it's science, whether or not it's medicine, all of those avenues, I have seen nothing but theirs being there in this whole experience. Every time someone brings the most recent thing is mud floods, right?
So many people ask me about this, and I imagine you're probably going to ask me at some point what YouTube I follow, and this is the truth. I don't follow anything. I barely use YouTube other than to put up a video when my show comes out, and I don't really respond on YouTube, which I call censorship tube. So to be honest with you, I'm not even really aware of what the mud flood is.
And I know enough about you. I wasn't going to ask you that question because I already knew the answer. But my only point was to bring up that that's another aspect of our history that is called into question by a lot of people, which is absolutely fascinating. You take a stand in challenging the mainstream narrative and questioning what we're told, but if we listen to your show, we become familiar with the fact that you also seem to remain vague on what needs to replace that narrative. Is there anything concrete for you that you would direct someone to believe? What would you recommend someone to replace that narrative with?
Well, I guess I am kind of vague, but there is an underlying cement foundation. It's held in the idea that belief is the enemy of knowing. The whole idea for me and what I'm doing is to hopefully offer people a new way to think about things and thereby change their minds. From my point of view, if enough minds change, then this whole false system begins to fall apart. And that is really the way. And so it's just kind of a more alchemical idea that a lot of minds need to change before we get any kind of significant change in our world. That is the main underlying thing. Can I present topics in a way that don't alienate mainstream thinkers, that don't alienate the non-mainstream thinkers, and get as many as possible to consider what's being laid down? And so many people ask me, what's the way forward? The way forward is changing minds. You know, you asked earlier, why do we need another book? Why do we need another podcast like yours? Well, this is why. Until the majority of minds challenge their reality and get back to thinking for themselves, we kind of have the world we're living in to continue living with, don't we?
You've just had a conversation with someone. What is it that you want them to concretely understand about their reality as they move forward?
This world needs to get back to common sense, and the easiest way to do that is to let nature be your baseline. Don't be fooled into all these unbelievable things like the president has a red button that can destroy the world. That's nonsense. That is not common sense. And any person who gets back to common sense will begin to understand these huge fallacies. Technology is a good example. Technology tries to convince us that all these things are possible that are not frickin' possible. We haven't even been to the moon. So where's your technology now? So I would just say that if you can value common sense and try to pull it back into your life, because each of us is born with common sense, school and everything else in this world tries to train common sense out of us, but at the base of having common sense, let nature be your baseline. If you can see it in nature, then there is a there.
Nature does not lie.
There is no lie in nature. There's much to know about nature. We see trees, we see rocks, and we assume there is reality there. But that's a whole nother kind of existential reality that people will have to come to understand, that anything in this world that does not have permanence has no actual reality and is therefore a type of illusion. But that's a whole other discussion.
All right, well, let's jump into that real quick because you just reminded me of Plato's cave. What do you think Plato's cave is about? Do you think that we can take it back? When I remember when I was in school and learning philosophy, I always understood Plato's cave to simply be a statement of philosophy about nature, I suppose, because the way that it was presented in summary was that Plato would say, okay, you see that chair over there. That chair is only a copy of the reality that exists somewhere in the universe.
So there is a physical and there is a form.
Do you think that Plato's cave was philosophical, or do you think it was actually, where I'm at right now, I'm willing to suggest that it's actually more of a construct analogy, a construct metaphor?
That's tough. If you see, the problem is the world we live in is a 3D material reality that we misinterpret through our five senses all the time. And to maybe understand it, this is why alchemy is so important, because to get back to the crux of things in this world, philosophy led you there. And so when you start to talk about similes and metaphors and all these other things, there's a whole spiritual side that has to be incorporated in understanding. And I use this example all the time, that we go out into the world to use nature as our baseline, and when we walk up to a tree, it in fact appears to be a tree in reality. But you see, if we get back to the human philosophical mind, we can understand that the tree is a temporary illusion. A tree, a rock, a cloud, they're all going to dissolve into something else. It's just a matter of time for each of those things. And so they have no permanence. And if you cannot assign permanence to a thing, truthfully, it's in transition. And anything in transition is an illusion, right? Because it has no permanence. I think that obliquely relates to the cave idea.
So give us a bit of your understanding and what you mean by, or how you use the term illusion then.
It's about the nature of what we call reality, and it's kind of partially what the Matrix story was about, although that story misled a lot of minds to confuse things and think we're actually in a computer program. I don't accept that we're in a computer program, but the idea here would be is for a thing to truly have existence, it has to have permanence. It has to find that unchanging state. Yet in this transitory 3D reality, there is not a thing you can point to mostly that is not in transition, that is not constantly changing. The one thing we can certainly say about this 3D reality is change is a constant.
Yeah, right.
Everything is changing all the time. And so we get fooled into thinking that things have permanence that do not have permanence. And this even relates to, the idea of what happens to a human being when they die. And when you begin to go down these roads and look at all the oldest accounts you can find, the basic overarching idea everywhere is that when a human being passes away, that's not the end of the road. In other words, it's a bit like this place, and I say it all the time, our current life is a bit like a cycle of hardship and necessity. It's not easy, and it's terrible in a lot of ways when you begin to break down the cage that this place kind of is, but it's part of what we need to do. And so when you begin to understand that there's more than this, or there must be more than this, and you can reasonably work that out, if there is nothing more than this, then what's the point? This is basically a waste of time. If everything I do here is just going to pass away like a rock or a tree and become nothing, then what is it about? And that drives the push to find out, really, truly, when a human being passes away, is there something more? If you're a person that decides to, look into, there probably is something more, then everything about this place, the whole perception changes. Like if you want to say the earth is flat, which I've never really signed on. I mean, this place, I don't accept anything about the spinning models. And I have said on the record, we live on a plane. But the reason I've said that is because if a human being is something more and we go on beyond our physical bodies, then that means there's got to be more than just a plane, doesn't there? And so what it does is it shows the myopic view of much of the description of the idea that we're living on a flat earth. But the problem with that is most people are just trying to show that there's been a lie told, and they're not concerned with anything further than that. So in a way, it's a catch-22.
Your statement about the existential meaning of our existence and whether or not life continues after this experience, where would you direct a person to go in order to understand that future reality? So you've got Hindu, you've got Buddhist, you've got Christian, you've got alchemical. I don't even know if an alchemical afterlife is talked about, but if we talk about process and transformation, which is what I think is a reality in all of those constructs, is transformation. In your mind, are they all the same story, or would you say, no, you know what, we've actually really got to work our asses off to find out which one is more there, which one is more true?
I've said for years and years, there's not an old culture going that doesn't have something to show you. And so when you ask, do you look at Hinduism, Buddhism, look at them all. But at the base of it, you don't need Hinduism or Buddhism or Christianity. It's you. You have the answers you seek. It's just that we live in an age of hyper materiality. And what that does is it obscures reality in a way. It's like science. If you can't smell it, taste it, weigh it, whatever, it doesn't exist. You'll get people like Einstein, the ultra materialist, coming in to say, guess what, guys, there is no ether. He's never going to give you a reason or an equation or an experiment. He's just going to make the dictate. And the dictate is made because it's time for you all to be hyper materialistic. These philosophical ideas that served the past so well need to go away. And that's how we exert control. So to answer your question directly, any old culture has quite a bit to teach you, and they're coming from their cultural context. They're trying to communicate something of importance in their cultural context. But at the base of it, you're a human being. You're the apex of this place. It could almost be said this place exists for you. You are the caretaker, the fashioner, the be-all and the end-all of this 3D materiality. So the truth is everything you need to know exists within you. It's just about learning how to access it.
Not to be pedantic and not to put too fine a point on it, but if our transformation, if we want to call it that, if our transition from this experience to the next after death is predicated upon our experience, a person would need to know that in order to progress. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying to a certain extent. That is, that this world exists for me, my experience, my growth, my ability to love, my ability to improve, change, morph, grow, however you want to. So that's for right here and right now. But if there is an aspect in which that growth affects the next experience and I don't know it, I think that's pretty important.
Certainly it is, and unfortunately I'm not qualified to offer anything more than I've said, but maybe it boils down to a question each person can ask themselves. Are you currently as high a human being as you could be? Could you be much better than you are? Is there something to seek for? Does a human being have some divine spark that allows them to ascend to amazing heights? I guess that would be the question. And so as long as someone accepts that that's probably correct, then there is a direction to head. I guess that's all I can offer.
No, that's fine. I was raised as a Christian from the age of 8 on. I've got my master's degree in biblical studies. So that's a lot of your information, a lot of other people's information flies directly in the face of those parameters that I was instructed in, that I was indoctrinated in. And so I've had to take a step back because, so for instance, in the Christian world, the transition into the next life is dependent upon the person and work of Jesus Christ on my behalf. So I get to go where he is because of who he is and what he has done. So the converse of that is that if you rely on yourself for that transition, you ain't gonna make it. You're not getting
Well,
it.
yeah, it's a bit like convincing people to give away their power. You know, on the one hand, you're being told you were made in the image of God in that tradition, and then on the other, you're being told you can't do anything by yourself.
Right.
So the real question becomes, am I made in the image of God, and do I have the ability to truly do amazing things as a human being? Or do I have no power at all, and without the assistance of something else? You got to make that decision for yourself, I guess.
All right, Crow, we're going to take a break in the middle of our show for an episode that I call Take It Easy.
Take it easy, take it easy.
Where we're just going to throw some softball questions at you, and you're going to give us your immediate response to 2 choices. Are you ready to take it easy?
Sure.
All right, here we go. Paul or Billy Shears?
Neither, actually.
440 or 432?
432.
Vegan or normal person?
That's a toughie. I don't eat a lot of meat, but I'm not vegan, so I'm somewhere in the middle there.
Red pill or blue pill?
You gotta know, man. Sleeping is not the way forward.
Straw man or living man?
Living man.
Early bird or night owl?
Boy, that's tough. Little of both, I guess.
Alchemy or big pharma?
Alchemy all the way.
East Coast or West Coast?
I got to go in the middle again. I've got roots at both ends, and I'm stuck in the middle.
Tesla or Einstein?
That's a tricky one because it's quite possible both of them are constructs. Of course, the idea of Tesla is better, I guess. Einstein's a complete construct.
Trust your senses or trust consensus?
Senses. You got to observe.
Coffee or tea?
Depends on the day.
Cream or straight?
Straight.
Vinyl or digital?
Vinyl.
Classic rock or classical?
Classical.
All right, thanks so much for taking it easy with us for a little bit during the show. Let's get back to the hard-hitting stuff.
Okay.
Take it easy, take it easy.
Actually, I do have one more question. What is one thing you can tell us that no one knows about Crrow?
Okay, something nobody knows about Crrow.
All right, man. Looks like you're going to have to tune in to the next episode to hear that little juicy tidbit that no one else knows about. I'm the only one that has this tidbit, okay? Just to let you know. So if you want to know what it is, tune in next week when I publish the second part of the interview with Crrow777. This is Travis Finley with RedHenn Radio. Thank you so much for joining me on our Maiden Voyage episode 1. Please make sure that you like, subscribe, share, comment. We hope to hear from you. We hope to be able to interact with your comments, positive, negative, critical, encouraging, informative, whatever it might be. We want to hear from you, and we hope to see you again. Until next time.
Welcome to the show where you don't know if it's part of the show. Welcome to the show if you don't know it's part of the show. Teach you to reach for the stars while opening up the bars and keeping you chained down with mortgage bills and cars, vaccines for your arms, kids sounding like supercharged, caffeinated hate-filled scars and rage-quit repertoires, no answers for yards, caught up in emotion that's not even yours, imposter truths like impeccable retards, lined up for your serving of gish galloping wars, no remedy can save the lost, in love with the yarn, I'm tired of walking into refracted shards, poor science displayed by disgusting bards, soaked in sin with your dupe is delight for a new hand of cards, been so long seems like for love I'm just too hard, I'm just too hard, that's it. Welcome to the show where you don't know if it's part of the show. Welcome to the show if you don't know. Intoxicated hate makes you believe you're spinning in space while you have no shame or grace. It's a disdainful state I used to contemplate how to save myself from my own self-hate. Wonder why I was even made with a dreadful fate, forced to try and awake with a full plate, no one to help me stay awake or educate. I've had to liberate and fight through hidden gates, but my brother, heaven could never be late, and rockets don't work in space. It's all fake, the show is on Mars, it's a joke, but you're too far gone, it won't be long. Fepe's beak is strong. We have our song and we march along like streams of knowledge leading to God's holy pond, and lives of truth that hits the bong and sings the song, turns mankind from the wrong. We come in peace with a holy gown and all of us wearing our holy crowns. So the earth is flat and we probably just won't get along. Just to go along, I said, welcome to the show where you don't know if it's part of the show.